Hey guys, how are you? Today, let's get to the bottom of a very common question. A lot of people are in the position where they've spent all this time learning a bunch of scale patterns, maybe even a bunch of different scales, and they're left with the question, what can I do with them? So with this lesson, I'm going to base it around the major and minor pentatonic blues scales, but feel free to substitute any scale in that you're working on, since this knowledge applies to all scales equally. So if you've worked on a bunch of scales and you're wondering what to do with them, then we'll just start with some pretty basic concepts and then work our way up to some more advanced stuff. A really great starting point, and perhaps one of the most basic things you can do once you learn a scale, is to start learning songs, solos, and licks that use those scales. Doing this is training your ear to the sound of the scale in a musical way, and it's also building technique and building an instant vocabulary. You're really starting to learn how to speak using that scale. If you're a little bit more advanced, this is why transcription is such an important tool. You can really dig deep into what makes that lick work. You can analyze the chord tones, the rhythmic density, etc. And these are the nuances that are going to help shape your own personal style in the future. Speaking of making our own music, let's look at a little scenario. I feel like learning a new scale today. Just going to consult my handy grimoire. And I'm going to learn the Locrian Natural 6 today. Okay, so it tells me to play this dot, this dot, this dot, this dot, this dot, this dot, and I'm just going to play up and down all the dots a million times until I've got them memorized and I know a new scale. Well, if that's the way you've been approaching learning scales, then the answer, what can I do with this, is not much. Sure, you can hunt and peck around for the right note within those dots, and your ear will eventually guide you to the right notes, but there's a much more efficient way to learn and use this material. Okay, wise guy, well, tell me what that is. Well, I'm glad you asked. Now, the problem with just learning dots is that dots give equal importance to every other dot. So if we took our pentatonic scale, blues scale, well, if all you're seeing is dots, this dot has no more importance than this dot, or this and this dot, they're all the same. So you can just play around in those dots and that's what you've got. However, in relation to a harmony and in regards to tension and release, every note is not equal. So what we need is a system of seeing and, more importantly, hearing harmonic color. So what we're going to do is put some information in there that will allow us to do that, and that's intervals, and that's represented with numbers. So instead of seeing this, we're going to see this. And with this, we can clearly see chord tones and extensions and non-chord tones. Now, knowing this information, creating your own solo and learning licks starts to make a lot more sense. For instance, here's a quick example. Angus used this at the end of AC/DC's Back in Black solo. Okay, and now if you've got the intervals in your mind, if you've learned those, and that's what you're seeing, very easy to see that we're bending up to the root, and we hit the root again, the 7th degree of the scale to the 5th of the chord. We're going to hit an A, that's a non-chord tone, and then we're just playing with our E minor triad, B, G, and E. So once you see this information, this becomes part of your vocabulary. Now you know that idea and what the thought process that went into creating it, and you can now use this to make your own stuff up. And it's going to make a lot more sense than just poking around in dots and wondering, when are you going to play something that sounds good? If you're a beginner or this is new for you, this might be enough info for you for now, and you can go back and learn all of those scale patterns, not as dots anymore, but as intervals. This is really going to help you. Now, if you haven't had a chance to check out my Pentatonic Scale Mastery series yet, you're definitely going to want to do that, as I guide you from beginning to end through this complete process. And I also include a lot more than just this. So I'll link to the complete playlist in the description below, and there's 5 videos in that series. It's almost an hour's worth of material. So it's a great step after this video to get you going. Now, for those of you who want to go deeper, there is another level to this. Like I said, as long as we're on a static 1 chord, then this information works beautifully. We can target our root, our 5th, our 3rd, non-chord tones, whatever we want to do. But what happens when the chord changes? All of a sudden, our chord tones that we know so well aren't working, and it feels like we're in limbo again, back to hunting and pecking around and hoping for a safe landing. Well, what you want to do is map out the chord progression within the scale pattern that you're working with. So if what we're working with is the A minor pentatonic blues, that one, let's say our chord progression was a 1 to a 4. So A minor to D minor. So figure out how to play those chords and see those chords inside that scale pattern. Now, in the end, you really want to know the names of the notes that you're playing and the names of the notes that are in all the chords of the progression, as well as just seeing patterns. But for now, you can do this and make great gains strictly seeing patterns. So let's just worry about seeing the patterns. Once you've mapped those chords out and you can see them within the context of the scale pattern, then you're ready to start soloing over that chord progression. And all that you need to do is just target the chord tones as those chords are coming up. So in measure 1, you can target any note of an A minor chord, which would be all notes directly out of that pentatonic pattern. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. So on beat 1 of the second measure, if we were going to play a D minor on measure 2, you want to be on that chord tone, a D. And now, your D minor, if you wanted to stay strictly within the pentatonic scale, you're going to notice that there's a tone in there, the third of our chord, doesn't actually belong in the pentatonic. So it's a good exercise to be very strict and only work with the scale that you're trying to really learn. But if you've already tackled this concept before, you can also start including those other tones that don't belong. So a D minor comes up, would be a prime time to put in an F. So we could have a little lick. Let's say we were playing A minor for measure 1, D minor for measure 2, and back to A minor for measure 3, using this idea. So we ended on beat 1 on a C again, which is the third of the A minor chord. So as you can see, once you understand these intervals and you map out the chord progression within that scale pattern, you know exactly where to go. You can resolve your lines to chord tones. You can throw in non-chord tones if you want a little more tension to extend your line. You know, be creative. And as you study other solos and other licks, you're going to add to that vocabulary and you're going to know exactly what you want to hear. You now know how to go about using the scales that you've been studying. Remember, don't learn dots. Learn the information that will allow you to hear and think in harmonic color. Like I mentioned before, if you haven't checked out my Pentatonic Scale Mastery series, be sure to do that at the link below where I take you through this whole process and more. And be sure to like and share this if you found it helpful. Please also subscribe so that I can continue to share these tips and tricks with you. I'll see you next time.